This is Mick Foley, the hardcore legend, and this is InYourHeadOnline.com.
All right, we're back. Welcome back to In Your Head. And we are joined by the author of Hardcore Diaries, the hardcore legend himself, Mick Foley. Welcome to In Your Head.
Hey, it's nice to be on In Your Head, and I guess you're also welcoming Mick Jr., who's said something about a big fire. Did you hear that?
Oh, man, no, I didn't hear that.
I'm telling him to keep it down, but it's sometimes these kids have a mind of their own.
I hope there's nothing burning around, is there?
No, he's playing a video game, and he destroy all humans, and he set his alien set a building on fire.
Oh, one of my favorite games there.
Ah, the intros are familiar with
that. This interview's really started off on a positive note.
We're with Mick Foley, and we're talking about destroying all humans. Well, let everybody know you got the book out, Hardcore Diaries. It's actually your third autobiography.
Yes. Yeah, you know what, actually it was Vince McMahon who convinced me that the world needed a third volume of my memoirs. Originally I wanted to kind of do like a behind-the-scenes look at WrestleMania. Like, I wanted to do for WrestleMania what a writer named Buzz Bissinger did for St. Louis Cardinals manager Tony La Russa, which is allow the world to see like the event through Vince's eyes. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I guess the idea of tailing Vince might seem a little scary, but it would also be fascinating. Mm-hmm. And then, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I became a big part of last year's Mania, and so I thought I was going to have to shelve that idea. And it was Vince who said, why don't you write another autobiography? And he really did a good job of convincing me in front of his whole creative staff that that I had a good way of telling stories, and that two autobiographies was not enough. And I think if Vince knew how much I'd criticized him during the course of this, he may have withheld that information.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed the book. I read it this weekend, and there's something you talk about a lot in the book. I was wondering if you ever thought about calling the book A Chunk of Vince's Ass.
No, I never did. But man, it's funny because that whole idea was designed around that chunk of ass. I don't want to give away too much for people who don't know.
Right.
And it goes back to at the end of the book, the last question I ask myself is if I knew then what I know now, would I still have gone and made that pitch in Stanford? And the answer is no way. So. Even though I wouldn't have done it again, I am kind of happy, that things worked out, because if I had, kind of taken my ball and left as I was contemplating doing at one point, I would not only would I not have done One Night Stand, but I would have, missed out on the 2 matches with Flair. Mm-hmm. And even though I was kind of disappointed in my own performances, I think those were some fun things to be involved with.
Yeah, well, some people might think it's weird that you put out, a third autobiography, but the thing is, you get so much detail because it's over such, a short period of time compared to like, the first autobiography.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I always look for when I'm reading these wrestlers' autobiographies. Mm-hmm. And I'm a pretty easy critic. Like, I like most of the autobiographies, mm-hmm. But even during the good ones, I find myself like thinking, all right, what was Funk thinking about going into that match with Brody in mm-hmm. Japan, or what was Flair thinking about when he went into this big match with Vader? And because these autobiographies cover, 30 and 40-year careers, it's really difficult to get inside a wrestler's head. And because I guess I'm in kind of the enviable position of just doing a few matches a year, I can kind of take the readers along for the ride. So, I'm still a wrestling fan at heart, and I try to give people what I think I would have liked to have read when I was a fan.
Yeah, you definitely get to see everything that goes in, not just the match itself, but all the build-up to it, all the promos, just, everything along the way.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, something actually I thought about when I was reading it, because I'm a big fan of the TV show Sopranos.
Right.
And I thought, like, the book reminded me of that, because it kind of shows both sides of Mick Foley, the wrestler, and a lot of about your family life.
Yeah, I guess, in the same, the episode that springs to mind for me with The Sopranos is where Tony is taking his daughter visiting
the
college.
college one. Yeah.
He ends up, finding a snitch along the way, and
right.
so
that's actually what I wrote in my notes here when I was reading the book.
Was it really?
Yeah.
And that was one of the most gripping scenes because you see this is a genuinely, good-hearted person who, on the other hand, won't hesitate to kill somebody who thinks he's has done him wrong.
Right.
And
I'm not saying you're a killer.
No, but it is one of my fears that people reading will be, all right, enough about this family stuff, but. There are certain chapters, especially the one about Santa Claus and Jesus, that I'm really happy I wrote just from a father's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Other people's opinions may differ, but I do have more, on my mind than just wrestling, and I think the book, should reflect that.
Yeah, definitely. Do you ever fear that, when you put out these books, that it can take away from, you making a comeback as one of your characters, because people kind of know who you are?
It doesn't seem to. As a matter of fact, I think it really helped me, back around the end of 98 and into 99 when fans really got a feeling for what I was like, The Latter-day Mankind was just kind of a goofier version of myself, and probably the closest I ever came to just acting like myself was when I was a commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why fans kind of put me in that league of top guys that I don't really belong in, because I somewhere along the line made an emotional connection, and I attribute that to kind of opening up and showing people what I was really like.
Do you have a question from the board, Intra?
I actually have a question myself.
Oh, okay.
Have you learned to type since the first book?
I do know how to type. I just don't know how to turn on a computer or a woman, for that matter. I was not a bad typist, but you know what? I just can't make like a mind typewriter connection, and I find that even if I'm just talking about writing, that I'll start like holding an invisible pen and moving it back and forth. Like that's just how my mind works. And I've come to find out that a lot of writers do their original draft longhand, but they're smart enough to do the second, and final drafts, with the help of the computer. Because, I take my hat off, to not only my editor, but to the people who transcribe this thing, because, there are arrows written, everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
page 362B, and it's, it's got to be frustrating from their standpoint. It certainly takes a lot longer, but no, I still, I like doing the original draft by hand.
The Flea from the message board, he has a question. Is it more difficult to wrestle or write?
Oh man, writing hurts a lot less, and and these days I think I am better at certainly it's easier to exaggerate your wrestling skills by writing about them than it is to go out there and prove it. And I think I'm a lot better about talking about how great a match I'm going to have than going out there and proving it these days as well.
We should have a caller here. Who is this?
This is Jobber.
Hey, Jobber, you're on there with Mick Foley. Got a question?
Yeah, can you tell some Al Snow jokes or some rib story?
You know what? I told a pretty good Al Snow joke for the magazine. I'll repeat it here since I'm guessing not too many people have seen the magazine yet. But there's a guy walking around the streets of New York with his dog, and he sees that there's a bar, and through the window he can tell that wrestling's on and Al Snow is watching. He walks up to the man at the door and he says, "Excuse me, I know that you don't allow dogs," he says, "but Al Snow is my dog's favorite wrestler, and we just can't pass without the dog catching this match." The guy says, "Okay, but the dog better behave himself." So the dog jumps up on the chair, and Al does a magnificent drop kick, and the dog does 2 laps around the bar, jumps up on his chair, pants 3 times. The guy says, "Man, that's unbelievable." And then Al executes a textbook perfect suplex, at which point the dog does 3 laps around the bar, rolls over twice on the bar, sits down in his seat, and pants 4 times. And the guy says, "Man, that is unbelievable. The dog goes that crazy when Al does a good move. He must go absolutely nuts when Al wins a match." The guy says, "I wouldn't know. I've only had the dog 3 years." You like that one, huh?
Yeah, we like that.
You know what the biggest shame of this book is that, there's really not much Al Snow really, relegated to Test.
Right.
And I guess Test is not with the company anymore.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking while you're writing it. I thought maybe they brought Tess back so it could be relevant with all
It
the
would
Tess
be
jokes.
smart to bring him back just to, run a feud based off the Hardcore Diaries jokes.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, when I'm writing, the name Test sounds funnier now than Al Snow.
The other question was about ribs. Actually, did you ever go to Abby's House of Ribs?
I had been to Abdullah the Butcher's House of Ribs, and it's an excellent place to eat. And I remember in '91 when Abby took me by the place, when it was just, open space. And I remember thinking, man, this is a great way to lose a lot of money. And I think most wrestlers outside business ventures don't fare too well. But man, he not only has great food, but he runs a tight ship. And if on the surface, soul food and Chinese food don't seem to go together, it does work in practice.
Mm-hmm.
But have you been there?
No, we talked about it a lot here on the show. We always try to get someone to come with us.
And I don't know how appetizing the idea of eating soul food while we're looking at pictures of Abdullah bleeding.
Yeah.
At one time, I think it was like in '92 when people would come in my house, and back when I had a me wall. The only pictures I was ever given were pictures of me bleeding. And I remember a friend of mine from college coming over and being like, quite turned off by the fact that there were 16 photos of me busted wide open all over my house.
We have another caller here, Chris. You have a question?
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Mick. First of all, I want to say it's an honor to talk to you. You've had some epic battles with The Rock and tagged with him. Do you ever get the chance to talk to him anymore?
You know what? The last time I talked to The Rock was at WrestleMania, 20. Was that it, where we teamed up together?
Mm-hmm.
And, he left a really cool message on my machine. And I think The Rock changes his cell phone number quite often, or maybe he just doesn't answer when he sees me calling. But, I guess over the next 6 months I got a couple messages from him, but I have not talked to him. I've relayed messages back and forth from someone I know he talks to frequently. But I'm kind of proud if The Rock never does have another match that, his last one was with me. And I mentioned in the book that I was surprised that he would want to come back and team with me because I had heard The Rock would only come back to something big. And I said that to Brian Gewirtz, the writer. I said, I heard Rock would only come back for something big. And Brian said, well, Rock does think this is big. And I said, wow, it's, it was a pretty big honor. But no, I haven't talked to him in a while.
Thanks for calling in, Chris. Speaking of Brian Gewirtz, you're one of the few guys I've heard really put him over.
You know what? I remember it was in the Meadowlands the night that Flair and I did that promo in New Jersey. Several hours before we went live, and I was talking a little bit about the book, and Brian said, "Hey, how come I never show up in one of your books?" And I said, "Hey, be careful what you ask for, because you're about to get it." And so he was, really waiting with bated breath, and people are upset with what I wrote about, certain people. Mm-hmm. But I guess, Brian Gewirtz was pretty happy with his depiction, and I talked to one of the writers last night who just seemed, happy to be mentioned at all. Mm-hmm. And I think, being Vince's head guy is a really tough job, and even if you don't care for Gewertz's style, the guy should probably get a Presidential Medal of Freedom just for dealing with Vince for 5 years. Yeah. Because, that cannot be an easy job.
I know, there have been people who said to write wrestling you have to be a legit tough guy and have a bunch of sexual escapades. I never understood why you'd have to do that to be a wrestling booker.
You know what? I guess there was some remarks that Gewirtz was not that adept at doing the romantic scenes because he probably didn't have that many of his call from. But I think he does. I mean, I really think he does a good job. And I know he fights Vince for certain ideas. And man, look at other people who've had that job, and it's not pretty. And like I said, just dealing with Vince, a guy who doesn't understand that normal human beings need to sleep more than 2 hours a night, is something to be proud of.
Was Vince upset over the loss of friendship comment you made in the book?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I know that they showed him a bunch of things that they had big concerns about. And I know one of them was the remark about how they treated JR's colon surgery. And there were 3 or 4 lawyers, I guess, hovering around the desk watching while Vince read it, and then he went, "That was funny." It didn't matter that I was blasting him. He was just going to stick to his guns. That was funny, and I don't know that Vince has read the whole thing, and I don't know how he would feel about it, if it would hurt his feelings or not. But that's the way I felt. I felt it was definite. That I felt like we used to be, and I don't know if you can actually be real friends with someone that you do business with. I even mentioned, in Foley is Good, that I felt bad for Vince because, his life was business, and therefore, he probably didn't have any real friends. Which is why he's, so tight with his family. But I definitely feel like, whatever friendship we may have had before I gave him that TNA call has disappeared.
Looking back, since how TNA's used Kurt Angle, do you think you could have made a big difference in TNA?
I don't know. I guess I could. It would have been a little shot in the arm, which is the way I put it in the book. But like I also said, there were so many things that my being there would not have been the answer to, that it probably would have just been a temporary thing. And honestly, like I said in the book, the jury was, still out on as to whether I could put together, a string of quality matches, which is what I would have had to have done there. And, I go back to where, I was thinking about doing a match with Samoa Joe in ROH. And I'd always told Gabe Sapolsky, "Look, Gabe, I don't know if I can do this thing." And Gabe said, "Look, don't worry about it." He said, "Trust me, we will do it in such a way that, even if we don't have a match, it'll still be a good program." And in the end, I thought, man, I'd be getting relatively little money to go out there and disappoint a lot of people. So I think if I was in that position where I had to carry a pay-per-view for 4 months in a row, that I probably would have disappointed a lot of people, and I probably would have, and among them, I would have disappointed myself. And probably, for me to be effective, if I was going to, if I had gone there, it probably should have been where I didn't start wrestling right away, but was dragged into it, via a commissioner's role or something like that. But I do go to bed each night, without the guilt of thinking I ruined TNA, because they'd probably be about exactly where they were, whether or not I was, part of the group.
I'll get another caller here. Who is this?
This is Travis.
Yeah, Travis, you got a question for Mick?
Yeah, I was wondering if Mick could tell the story of him, Austin, and DDP when they were all out. The one time, the cookie story.
You want me to relate the cookie story to you? That's a long story, man. And it's in the book in its entirety. So, do you guys have time to spend on the cookie story?
Well, we have time as long as you don't mind. But
all right, yeah, I'll just give you the Reader's Digest version. Dallas was a fairly high-strung individual, and at the start of a 4-day road trip, Stone Cold and I, who was not Stone Cold but stunning Steve Austin at the time, kind of made just a bet, a non-monetary bet as to how many days it would take us to crack Page on the road. And I think Austin said 4 days, and I said I thought we could crack him in 3. And I specifically remember Page, calling down at the hotel for towels, and he complained that there were no large-size towels. And Page is one of those guys who's not trying to be offensive when he calls a woman like Sweetie Pie or Honey Buns. It's just the way he is, And he was like, "Okay, Honey Pie, I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, cutie." And then he hangs up and he says, she was sweetheart. And then Paige goes out to the soda machine, and the lady comes with this large stack of towels, which Stone Cold and I promptly hid, except for a couple of washcloths. And come back in, and all of a sudden the cutie pie, Paige said, "Did she come with those towels yet?" And we said, "Yeah, they're right there on the rack." And he sees these 2 little washcloths hanging on the rack. And the cutie pie turned into a BITCH in a hurry, and he was about ready for blood, so we kind of told him we'd been kidding around, and he goes into the shower, he takes a shower, and he comes out, Page's one of those rare guys who likes to be naked at almost all times, when he's not in public.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really weird, no matter how, how good you are with your own sense of manhood, it's kind of weird to see a naked guy at all times. And, to make it worse, he had this stupid theory that if he put saran wrap around his knees with some type of minerals, that, he was protecting his knee joints. And, compounding that with the fact the guy would actually bring his own hammer and nails so he could nail the blinds, to the wall, so not a peep of of light would not a crack of light would peep in. And I think Paige was on the cot that night because we would triple the room. Looking back, who knows how much money we actually saved by having 3 guys in the $30 room as opposed to 2 guys. And there'd been like 48 cookies, 4 dozen cookies given to us by a fan. And while Paige was in the shower, I took all those cookies and I put them in his bed, and he goes to lay down, and it's darkness, total darkness, and he lays down, and I can kind of hear him as he lays down. He's like, what? And then he starts dropping the F-bomb like 7, 8 times in a row. Someone put effing cookies in my bed. Who put effing cookies in my bed? And the only thing that gave it away is, Mickey likes the story, I guess. The only thing that gave it away is that, I couldn't control that, like, hard breathing laughter while I was going. And so Paige gathers up as many cookies as he can, and he's like got him in an armful of cookies, and he opens up my sheets and he throws the cookies on top of me, and he starts jumping up and down. How do you like it? How do you like it when someone puts effing cookies on you? And he was waiting for me to get hot, and I said, Paige, it's not the cookies, it's your naked ass grinding to me. Getting to me a little bit, and with that, he just like all sent life went out of him, and he went back and he kind of swept the rest of the cookies off his cot, and he laid down again, it's total darkness, and he goes, tomorrow I think I'm going to get my own room. So that's how we cracked Paige in 2 days. And you know what, when I do these college speeches occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought, like, that would be great. Like, I never have a set, it's not like I'd bring any props with me, but I thought it'd be great just to have 3 single beds out there and kind of bring in, like, if I could get him in, with his visa papers, that guy Jason Sensation, who used to do all the invitations.
Oh, yeah.
From Canada. And then just hire somebody to be, to be Stone Cold. And we could reenact that, and I think it would work really well as a 1-act play. So, but I appreciate you enjoying that story.
Yeah. Speaking of DDP, have you tried out YRG?
Yoga for real men?
Regular guys, yep.
For regular guys. No, I haven't, but you know what? My back went out on me really bad like 4 days ago. It hurt me. I heard it about a month ago, and I was trying to rehabilitate it on its own, and then it really went out of me, to the point where I didn't think I was going to make it on the plane to Phoenix. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody within the business told me that I ought to, it was not somebody within our business, it was Dee Snider, the Twisted Sister guy, who has a really nice chapter in the book. Which one of you guys read the book?
That's me, Jack.
Isn't that a good chapter?
Yeah, definitely.
And Dee called me up, he said, I am beaming, and I thought he said, I'm steaming or seething, like he didn't want me, exposing him as being a nice guy. And he was beaming. He really liked the chapter, and he said, "Hey, I met," and he had apparently hit it off with DDP, and there's a little thing in that book about Dee doing yoga, before a show, and I said to Dee's son, hey, I bet your dad doesn't want people knowing he does yoga, like, trying to say something cool when you don't really have anything to say at all.
Right.
And the kid turns to me, he's like 15 years old, and he goes, my dad wore women's clothing for 10 years. I don't think he cares what people think of him.
Right, that's true. He does Fangoria Radio now.
Yeah, being put in your place by a teenager.
He does Fangoria Radio now.
Dee?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he's a talented guy, and even though it's like a corny line at the end, where it be, he said, I want to thank you for making me a better person. That meant a lot to me, and the fact that he's gone on, to be like the, March of Dimes chairperson for their Ride for Life. It kind of makes me feel like Haley Joel Osment in Pay It Forward.
We get another call here. Who is this?
Hey, it's Jason.
Hey, Jason, got a question for Mick?
Yeah, and I got to explain this question.
Okay, you have to explain the question?
I'll get the notes.
Let's hear it.
Explain why I'm asking it.
All right.
I collect all wrestling. Good, bad, horrible.
Okay.
I enjoy Herb Abrams' UWF. Could you please tell some stories from Herb's UWF?
Can I tell a couple stories from Herb Abrams' UWF?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'll tell you a little bit about that night, in Vegas, where Herb, to his credit, he had booked, what's that huge arena where they have some of the biggest events in the world? You guys know the one I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
MGM Grand.
MGM Grand.
Oh, okay.
And, man, if you ever envision the MGM Grand with only 200 people in it, that's the environment on hand. And, I was supposed to wrestle Snuka, who, was my hero. And, I don't say Snuka was loaded, but he had certainly appeared to be loaded. And, and Herb had told me, that I was supposed to, win the match, and he wanted me to tell Snuka. And here I am going up to my idol and telling him what Herb wants. And Snuka said, "Brother, sometimes," as he went into this, long thing. And so I just looked at him and I said, double count out? A lumberjack match, And so I'm going around like trying to recruit my own lumberjacks, and I've got like 3 midgets, 2 women wrestlers, and like only 1 or 2 guys would even volunteer to be part of it. And I remember B. Brian Blair, after he's going out to the ring, he's like, "Well, hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Double count out." He said, "Lumberjack match?" I said, "It's Herb's show. We can do whatever we want." So Snuka and I fought into like the 20th row, which is about 18 rows past where people are actually sitting, and it wasn't a half bad match. I mean, it certainly wasn't the low point of the show where Herb was getting hammered by the match and doing the play-by-play. And I remember after who was the little guy that Little Tokyo won the prestigious midgets title,
Right.
And Herb said, "Maybe you have some sake to celebrate." And Little Tokyo said, "How you know sake?" And Herb said, "I was married to a Jap once." So it was. I remember, that I didn't know Kurt Hennig that well, but I remember the night before the big show, that Herb was walking around, and it wasn't like, "Look at what we're going to do with this match." It was like, he goes, "Look at these boots. The fans are going to go crazy." And he had these yellow ostrich skin boots that said UWF on them. And, I mean, he came out, that next night, and he was just strutting those boots. Like, it didn't matter to him that this thing was a financial disaster. All that mattered was, that he was the focus of the show. It was his show, and, the checks would all bounce later on. But for that one night, Herb was king. And, about the best thing I liked the guy, but I remember, and I talked about this in my first book, that when I, read that he had died, I said, "Oh, man," and my wife said, "What?" I said, "Man, Herb Abrams died." And she goes, "No," because she knew Herb a little bit, because she'd gone to the shows in New York. And I started reading the details, and when it came, like, to the part where, he was, oiled up and naked and chasing women with a baseball bat, I couldn't help but laugh. Like, if I had to list, all the possible ways I would like to go, that wouldn't be on the list.
Right.
And I think the best form of flattery I can give Herb is, like, that's the way he should have gone, like making people laugh is probably the proper send-off because he was such a character.
Let's see another call here. Norin, you got a question?
Yeah, I have 2 questions, actually. In March of '97, I got to see you at an independent show in Kaiser, West Virginia.
Okay.
You were wrestling John Rambo at an NWL event.
In 87, right?
What?
That would have been 87. Well, you said 97?
97 in Kaiser, West Virginia.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember that. I remember wrestling Rambo, like, in Saipan and Guam in, like, 90, when I left WCW, like, in 93, or maybe back, I left the first time in 90. I honestly don't remember wrestling in the 97.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the exact date, so I sent him an email, and he sent me one back and said it was March 15th, 97, 17-minute match. We were all over the gym. It was great. I was wondering, did you do a lot of indie shows like that in the late 90s when you were still with the WWE?
Yeah, that was a weird decision by Vince to let us do that. I remember, for example, doing a match 1,000 miles from Milwaukee before I was doing a main event with Stone Cold, back when I was Dude Love. And it wasn't like it was that, it wasn't like the money was that great either, but, at that time, like, you never knew when it was going to end, so you kind of wanted to make as much as you could. But I remember really thinking, man, this was not a real good decision to make because, Austin was like a machine in the ring, and, if you went to him and said, hey, kid, I didn't get any sleep because I did an indie show, and can you take it easy on me? That wouldn't be met with a very positive response, because he was all business once he got out there. And I don't know why we did those type of matches, but I remember doing a handful of them before, Vince wisely, stopped letting the guys do independence. But I honestly remember having good matches with Rambo, overseas, but I don't remember that Kaiser, West Virginia match.
Yeah,
but if he said it was good, I'm going to take his word for it.
Remember, you actually mentioned the Cape Cod Melody tent in one of your books, and that made me pop because I've lived here on Cape Cod my whole life.
But that wasn't an independent show. That was WWE.
Yeah, but you're right. But it was just that you mentioned the tent, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. I remember, I think that was when I was wrestling Triple H before he was Triple H. He was just Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Mm-hmm. And I remember, grabbing him by the nose with a pair of salad tongs and giving him a veal toss, and it was a nice break from, the wear and tear of having, hard matches in the old, WWE rings. You had to use a smaller ring to even...
Yeah, because it's
building, so you could get away. And that was, I think, it was either Cape Cod or the Hyannis. The Hyannis had a, I don't know if the Melody tent.
Well, the Melody tent's actually in Hyannis.
Hyannis, okay. Yeah. And that was the day that Jimmy, our merchandise guy, I should remember his name, but I don't offhand. He was talking to me about, coming out with a Mankind T-shirt, and I looked at the list that guys had. Next to their names, and like the Stalker, Barry Windham had like 15 items listed. They just had one for me, and the big one was Mark Henry had like every item you could conceive of. They had planned for Mark Henry, and Austin came walking over and he said, "Oh, Jimmy Miranda." He said, "Hey Miranda, how about a shirt for Stone Cold?" And Jimmy got all kind of flustered, and he's like, "What's wrong, Miranda?" And Jimmy said, "Steve, I'm sorry, the office just doesn't see any marketing potential in you." So, one thing you have to give credit to Vince for, among other things, is changing, with the times and kind of catching on to something when he sees it's going to be big. But it's funny to look back and think that, the Stalker and Mark Henry were going to be, carrying the marketing load, and that Stone Cold wasn't going to give it anything.
Get another caller here. Who is this?
Game 5.
All right, you got a question?
Alright, hey Mick, I'd like to know who you consider a bigger star, The Rock or Stone Cold?
To consider a bigger star?
Yeah, The Rock.
You say a bigger star? Let's see, how can I'm trying to figure out how I can phrase this question so I can get the title of my book, The Hardcore Diaries, into it. I'm veering off the book. You guys are getting me telling...
Oh, sorry about that.
All right. You know what? I mean, it's kind of tough to say, because without Stone Cold, I don't think there would have been a Rock, I think Stone Cold was the guy that really came in and changed, the face of the business in the late 90s. But then the Rock was right there to not only, pick up the pieces, but actually, to become, even bigger to the mainstream world. So I kind of put them about even with each other.
Well, speaking of big stars, in your book you talked Edge. You think is the best heel in the business right now.
Yeah.
Would you still say that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would, and I think that's because he goes out of his way, as he describes it, to be a guy with no redeeming qualities. It's really kind of it's marvelous to look at. I mean, he's a guy that turns his back on his friends, leaves his girlfriend hanging. He does anything to look out for himself, and he's not afraid to be a coward when the time is right for it. And, he just takes such pride in being a bad guy. And I think for years, top bad guys thought that they weren't, really coming across well unless they were getting cheered by a good percentage of the fans. And Edge kind of sees that as an insult if someone were to cheer him. And eventually, he's one of those guys so good at being bad that people will cheer him. And I thought it was amazing when he got like 95% cheers in Montreal, and he went from like basking in the glory of the crowd. This is one night after he and Cena had that phenomenal tables, ladders, and chairs match, and then with one comment, he had those same 90% people booing him. And I think he liked being cheered, like as a sign of appreciation, but I think he looked at getting them to boo him again as being a challenge and one that, he was up for.
Yeah. And he's also, when he does those heel things, it's believable. It's not like someone doing something evil for the sake of being evil. You can see the character actually doing those.
Yeah, exactly. And so I love watching him. And I think, one thing, even though during the course of this book you can kind of see that, my great idea for a one-night stand kind of came unraveled and became, something of a creative disaster, that I said, like, the one really good lasting legacy, other than contributing to a show that did, amazingly well, considering how, much trouble I thought it was in, is that Edge was able to kind of stay in the same place. I think he was at a position where if he didn't have a decent program, he could have taken a step back and never gotten back on top again. And I think fans accepted it as being a lateral move. And, a month later, he was, the guy working with Cena at SummerSlam. So, and I just talked to him last night about the Money in the Bank match. And I said, that's my, pick to steal the show, because you're going to have, I know it's 8 guys this year, but you're going to have several guys in there who feel like they could be and maybe should be in one of the main events, and they're going to go out there with the idea of stealing the show to prove that they should have been in the main event. And it's great to have a guy on the card like Edge who night in and night out makes that his goal, to steal the show.
Do you think they did a good job on capitalizing on, like, Tommy Dreamer after that match? Because it was such a good match, and Dreamer was so over on that show, but I don't think you really seen much of him since. People who read the book will see that, I kind of think they dropped the ball on both Dreamer and Funk. And, the nice thing about WWE is that ultimately everything is Vince's decision, so I'll just ultimately place all the blame on him. It's tough when a guy thinks that a certain wrestler doesn't have it. And I remember, trying to go to bat, and I remember saying, listen, go back and watch that ECW DVD. That thing, it sold a phenomenal amount. I don't know if it was 250,000 or 300,000 copies. And I said, look, I was interviewed for that thing just like, Dreamer was. But somebody, the producer who put that thing together, judged that Dreamer had a lot of interesting things to say, and that's why he's in it so much more than I was. It's basically him, Paul E. and Taz, really carrying the ball. And I thought because he, really lived and breathed for ECW, and because he was willing to put his, heart and soul into the company, that he would have been a great guy to really push. And man, at some point, during the proceedings, I think I described it as, saying, for all the interest they put behind, all the push they put behind Funk and Dreamer, we might as well be wrestling a couple of guys, out of wrestling school. I said, one guy looks like an old man with a bad knee, and the other guy looks like a dumb guy with love handles, And obviously Funk and Dreamer had a lot more to offer than that. Now I'm slipping into this part where I start bruising Vince, so we should probably end this thing in a couple minutes. Okay, there's one thing definitely I want to bring up about the book that was Promo Land.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite parts of the book. Do you think if you weren't such like a family guy that you could, like your wife kind of grounds you and you still have to do the chores, that you could get like lost in Promo Land?
I still do from time to time. I think it's good that, my and I told a story about, coming back from the Garden after they'd honored me in 2003 and really being on top of the world, despite the fact that Orton threw me down a flight of stairs, and it was really hurting, by the time I got home, which was only about an hour and a half ride. And I came back and I said, man, that was one of the best nights of my life. And my wife said, oh, can you take the garbage out? So I went out, I took the garbage out, and he's like, can you see that the dog's been fed? And I went and I fed the dog, and then finally, she's like, and the guinea pigs, the cage, even though they don't have a cage, they have like one of those kids' swimming pools so they can run around a little more. And it's really starting to smell, and I just turned to her and I said, 2 hours ago, 20,000 people were chanting my name. So, believe me, it's hard to really believe your own press, when you're married to a good person. But that doesn't prevent me from, slipping into promo land. You're not the first person that's mentioned that to me, which is, I'm happy about, because apparently it's a decent, metaphor. But that was, my idea of where I would go, like that place in my mind where I'd go to, think of things. And it didn't matter whether it was, at the kitchen table eating, or whether I was in the middle of a 500-mile road trip. My mind was in this place, where I would come up with ideas, and the challenge was always to take the ideas that seemed so real in my head and make them come to life on television. And man, sometimes I just wish I had a camera at like 3 a.m. on a secluded highway so I could get out there and cut the promo. But I think, on a few occasions, like with the promo I did with Terry Funk in Lubbock, and the promo that Flair and I did together in New Jersey, I did live up to the expectations that I had for it. So it is unfortunate that because of the way the wrestlers are brought up, like there's no need for promo land. That unfortunately, like even if they come completely prepared and they've thought about everything they want to say, chances are they'll be, kind of pushed into another direction. But, on Monday night I was telling a couple of the young guys, look, you never know when you're going to get that chance. When someone hands you a live microphone and they don't have anything for you, or they want to see what you can say on color commentary, I said, you may only get that first chance. You may not get another chance to make a first impression, and you got to take advantage of it, while you can. So I'm hoping, when I come back, that's one of the things I can do is, help some of the other guys get a better feel for their characters.
Well, we really appreciate coming on tonight. Good look at the book. Everybody check it out, Hardcore Diaries. Anything you want to tell the fans before I let you go?
Yeah, I just, man, I'd be heartbroken if, after your interview with Bischoff won Best Interview of the Year, if we couldn't. No, I think Bischoff was fascinating. I didn't happen to, hear or see the one you guys did, but I know we just did something for 24/7 dealing with the Monday Night Wars, and I thought he was tremendous. So I wouldn't doubt that was a really good interview, but. Hey, I'm glad you guys seem to enjoy it. And like I said, I did do a little checking so that I wasn't going to be in a position where I'd just, be talking nonstop about the same stuff over and over again. And apparently you guys have a good following. And, hey, maybe we're going to see a big spike tomorrow in sales.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank everybody calling in. We had 16 missed calls, so sorry, everybody.
All right. Well, you guys have a great day, okay?
Hello, and howdy do, everybody. This is Al Snow of Tough Enough, of WWE, of ECW, and Chief Cook and Bottle Washer, and anything else that'll get me paid. You're listening to InYourHeadOnline.com right now, which of course you know because you're at your computer.